Sick is a sort of a timely tale of two young college students who go to quarantine at a lake house, and really scary things happen. And if anybody else wants to expound on that?
I think that's basically the story, so I think you kind of nailed it. What happens is, obviously it's a movie that the setup is, leaning into classic horror, archetypes, and but hopefully what we do and what, Kevin and Caitlin cleverly did is sort of subvert a lot of these archetypes along the way.
Well, I think we're all living in and also it's very in the very first few days of the quarantine. I think within the first month is when our story takes place, and so we kind of wanted to take everyone back to that time where there was so much fear and uncertainty in our day-to-day lives, and I just thought, what would happen if we took that fear and uncertainty and just sort of created a slasher film and gave COVID a face, and that face had a knife, and we put two individuals in peril and see if they could rise to the occasion and overcome it.
Parker
Yes,
and
come on,
Mary.
Parker.
Well, we can talk about it together.
True.
I mean,
True.
they're two best friends, more like sisters. I think that Mary is Parker's sister because of certain circumstances she's dealt with in her life. And, their love and trust for each other really shows through the survival in the film.
Right.
And then both being final girls, usually that's not the outcome to have two of them, but...
Yeah, and I was also going to say that I feel like in a lot of ways we had to find different ways to understand what it is that actually makes them, that makes them tick. And I feel like this idea of like chosen family and what that means to college students specifically, but especially to women in a world where you do feel already unsafe as it is, and so like, and especially when it comes to like intruder stories and stuff like that. So I feel like me and Gideon were tapping into like a very real relationship that we have. So I'm very lucky to have that.
It was not difficult to create that between us. We didn't even have to create anything.
Yeah, I feel like Miri and Parker are your classic ride or die, pun intended, right? So it's literally like they're each other's final straw, and within the whole scheme of this chase, I feel like you have to understand the reasoning, and there is absolutely a reason for every reaction that they have, because it's quite literally a reaction since it all like takes place in one day. So I just feel like both of these characters are very real, and you will, if you don't relate to one, you will definitely relate to having a friend like the other. You know what I mean? And so it felt really special to be able to tell that as somebody who had their college experience cut short, during it. So it was super therapeutic, and I'm just really lucky that we were able to like make this piece with the people that we had. Yeah.
I got involved. I had met with Ben Fast, who works with Kevin at his company, and Ben is a producer. And Ben was sort of integral to this project. He was. I can't stress enough how much he had to kind of handle and deal with on this one. But Ben brought me the script that Kevin and Caitlin had written, and immediately I was just struck by what a kind of visceral ride it was, and also that it's not actually a genre I've ever really stepped into before, specifically like the, let's say, slasher genre. But what I liked about it was that it was the way that Kevin subverted this genre, and that it kept me guessing always, because it would set up certain things that kind of played into my expectations, and then suddenly, as we've talked about, it kind of bypassed the second act for a long third act, which was just a kind of a climax that keeps going and going, and then sort of upping the ante over and over. And I found myself just really compelled by what was happening in it. As there's one scene in particular with Gideon's character Parker, where they've already been in the middle of this chase and things are escalating, and she kind of has a what amounts to a fight in the kitchen in the house, and I remember reading that particular scene and the way that scene played out, and I think that was the one that hooked me. I said, okay, I really want to make this movie, and so it was all there on the page. Everything that we did was in the script, and the challenge was just, can we execute all these things?
You know, I love the subgenre in horror of the slasher film. And I love the chase scene. I love the final girl. And in this case, we have two final girls. And the chase scene, I thought the whole beginning of this was, how can we do an entire movie that's really just one long chase scene? And, and I love the action. I love the set pieces. And I love watching a character emotionally take us through the sort of the thought process of what would you do if you were in this situation? If someone came at you like this, how would you respond? And Katie and I went through the script and made sure that both of these characters make the best decision in the moment. So we don't have a character who is failing at and they still have to overcome. They still are up against it at every step of and you just have to walk yourself through it. When you sit down to write and you come up with, well, this is what they do, then what do they do next? And then what do you do next? What's the next smart decision? And it may or may not work. And then you have to come up with another decision. And so it's always about reaction. And it's, life is 10% of what happens to us and 90% our reaction to it. And if you take that thought process into writing a horror film, it makes it emotional. The reaction is always the emotional part of these stories. And if you don't have emotional horror, there's no point.
It was, quite literally, as I was reading it in 2021, it was quite literally something I'd never seen before, right? But I'm very familiar with the horror movies. We all are, like Kevin Williamson's work and all of those things. I remember being in my apartment by myself. My roommate was out reading the script for the first time, and I remember there was a tight timeline for the self-tape, and I read it, and so I just, kind of went through it, and it was one of those scripts that I couldn't skim. There's too many details, and it was coming to life off of the page a little too much, for a little unsettlingly, and so I feel like to be a part of a piece of art that I felt like I could bring myself in my entirety, work with people who are at the top of their game, might I add, and also this is my first film out of college that I did, my first job, and so to be a part of something that to me was special as somebody who had the end of my college experience taken away from me from COVID and stuff, and being able to put it in the one place that I knew how to, which is like this work and this relationship and this situation that in a lot of ways I feel like mirrored, like physically and metaphorically, how it is that those times we're feeling for like young adults at that point, or anyone at that point. So I feel like the team was amazing. The work, I feel like, is something that whether or not when you connect with it or not, it's a time capsule piece that you were going to go back to, show your kids one day and understand what it is that felt or something. And so for me, at least personally, as an artist and an actor, to be able to represent something that is very real and very true to me in a way that is probably the most fun ever, pretending to be in a slasher film, like what? Being in a slasher film. And yeah, so there wasn't any other reality without it. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I've never done a slasher. I really wanted to do a slasher. I think I want to do everything. I want to keep learning, sorry. And this script was, it wasn't trying to be anything that it wasn't. It's like, oh, it's a slasher film, but it's so different than anything. I don't know if you can agree. I've never seen a slasher like this. The way that John shot the film was very artistic and beautiful, and Kevin and Caitlin, the way that they wrote it,
they were so generous with the characters and how they care for each other that it allowed us to build a very real relationship. And
yeah, but it was, what drew me to it was all of it. My meeting with John, the chemistry read with Beth. I wanted to do it so badly, and it was my first project back from the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So being on set, seeing how everything in the industry had changed, how you hang out with people and everything, and then having it be about COVID and quarantining and the fear of that and the fears that I felt being in a house and, and what we all went through. Yeah, I was the whole thing I was buzzing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.